those of you that were here a little bit earlier, we'd just like to share with you the music that you heard came from the theater organ of the Chateau. Hopefully we will get a theater organ back into the Chateau again, but just wanted to point out that that was a recording from the Chateau. Certainly I'd like to welcome you all here. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm just going to divert to Kevin, who has really been instrumental in putting this presentation together. So Kevin.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Ann and the University of Minnesota Rochester, excuse me, for inviting us here this evening. John and I are graduates of the University of Minnesota. John in 1970, University of Minnesota Duluth, and I graduated from the University of Minnesota in 1977.
Called the main campus, is that right?
It is called the main campus, yeah. And but I won't hold that over you. I've never lorded that over you. At any rate, we're extremely pleased to be here tonight, and John and I, you need to understand from the beginning, this is not scripted. This is, we're true to the poster. This will be freewheeling. So we hope to get through the slides in about an hour and then have a dialogue with people about what it is that they're concerned about in the community. So I want to give you just a little preamble. John and I are proud founding members of something called the Rochester Conservancy. And there's a little bit about that here, and then this is kind of our signature poster behind us, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So I want to preface and give a backdrop to the presentation tonight. The unique character of the city of Rochester, Minnesota, is a tapestry of more than 150 years of contributions by energetic, creative, and caring citizens. It is important to honor and preserve the tangible legacies of our forebears by telling their stories, reusing and repurposing their edifices, and directing our future blend harmoniously with our past. Rochester's medical service to its legions of patients, the nation, and the world are synonymous with the Sisters of St. Francis, the Mayo family, and the Mayo Clinic. We are justly proud of these skilled individuals in this incredible institution. Yet our story, part of the story you'll hear tonight, transcends the biographies of those pioneers and Rochester's hospitals. Our story spans the farms, neighborhoods, streets, guest homes, rooming houses, hotels, fraternal organizations, service clubs, churches, public parks, schools, and city businesses, including the amazing IBM legacy. For it is in these and other public and private places where our guests have always been embraced. Our collective stewardship responsibility is to maintain this textured heritage as our city continues its evolution. So with that, John and I are going to take spots here, and we're going to go through this. And if you've got any questions or want to interrupt us in the middle of it, just let us know. So
I'm going to say something now. You said this is freewheeling. Bunny Kettlecamp needs to be acknowledged for what she did in participating and putting this together. And you can stand up or wave with both hands if you like.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Sean and the Olmsted County History Center.
The Olmsted County History Center, which is a great repository of what we had and what we might be in the future, contributed greatly as well. So goes without saying that as you see this presentation, without their help, this wouldn't have, it would have been more freewheeling.
It would be. And then my friend, our great friend, Mike Pruitt of MLT Group, really helped put this in a meaningful order and fine-tuned it to a very professional degree. So we're thankful for his expertise as well.
Stay right here, too.
Oh, okay, Mikey. So are these, can you hear us okay?
It could be louder.
Could be louder? Okay, all right. This is an older audience, so turn your hearing aid up, check your battery, see if it's plugged in, okay?
Well, let's just check this. Can you hear that a little better now?
Is it hotter? Is that
Maybe
better?
a little bit up?
Is that
okay.
better?
All right.
Okay.
So I'm going to sit here and operate this, John. Is that
Alrighty.
okay? All right.
That's fine.
All right. I thought we had. Oh, is this on, Annie?
Yeah, it should be on. It might be too far away though. We'll get closer up here. You're actually, you gotta aim.
You want to move up, sit here?
Okay.
Who knows what this is?
What? No. Yeah, St. Mary's Hospital. What we're going to talk about is right here. The lovely, intimate, old world European-style auditorium was constructed in 1927 behind the hospital and was called acoustically perfect. Its exterior was constructed of oriental red bricks enhanced with tall columns. The interior had an almost Italian charm of chandeliers, lantern lights, sculptured plaster balconies, and tiled corridors. You could hear a stage whisper from the balcony. The first speech ever given in the auditorium was by Charles H. Mayo before 650 delegates from the American Hospital Association. And here again you can see its relationship. This is St. Mary's Park. And there's the water tower there. And then, as you note, there's a lot of those homes had not even been constructed up there at this time. In September, there's the exterior of it. In September of 1937, Eleanor Roosevelt addressed over 1,000 nurses in the auditorium. In October 1939, the auditorium was visited by Helen Keller. The blind, deaf author spoke to more than 700 nurses and told them, quote, "If you carry a vision in your hearts, God will perform miracles through you." It was the civic auditorium for Rochester Symphony Orchestra, choruses, and operas. Jack Benny soloed there with the symphony. Guest artists ranged from John Philip Sousa to the Vienna Boys Choir. 42 classes of St. Mary's School of Nursing accepted their long-stemmed roses and diplomas from the stage. The great Rochester composer Orvis Ross stated, quote, "It's just like something that would have been put up in Mozart's time in Salzburg, Austria." Tom Jones, who owned KNXR, declared that the facility was an excellent recording studio. The dome ceiling and its rounded side and back walls created an infinite number of non-parallel surfaces which produced the pleasing sound of reverberation, he said in 1977. It creates a phenomenon similar to that experienced with the great dome ceiling in the Mormon Tabernacle of Salt Lake City. St. Mary's Auditorium was demolished in the summer of 1977, only 50 years after its construction, for hospital expansion that occurred a number of years later. One of the things that John salvaged right here, and you can see it later, is this theatrical gargoyle from the building's exterior. And if I can go back, they were right up in here. There they are. And they rimmed that. So John, you may want to comment about this and your experience in salvaging items from there.
I want to try and put a positive spin on what we've lost, but it is most difficult. When this acoustically perfect auditorium didn't need mics in it, by the way, to speak. When this was demolished, it was in perfect operating condition. Some of you might remember that there was a swimming pool as well. This was to encourage good health to the nurses. This was for the nurses, and then it was a meeting place for music and song and oration. The building was filled with marble and brass. When this particular building was demolished without any public discussion, I'm just going to say, not for self-grandizement, but I made a promise to myself. I promised to myself that if anything as phenomenal as this were to be challenged in the city of Rochester, that I was going to challenge myself and push myself to the nth degree. I want to emphasize there was no public discussion as continued decades later because the Mayo Clinic was involved. Whenever the Mayo Clinic is involved or the founding or the city council in Rochester, Mayo gets what they want. This particular auditorium was as perfect as the day it was built. So it was demolished, what was it, 40, how many years later?
42 years. I think.
42 years later. Some of the marble exists, some of the brass exists. If you remember that little iron affair that you could kind of look outside, I don't know if you remember that little, that still exists. There are some artifacts that exist that hopefully are going to be placed at some point in time in the future to remind people what we had. So that took place without any public discussion.
Okay. So that's the last concert. That's a photograph of the last concert. You can see the orchestra pit.
I think the male choir, wasn't it?
Yeah, look
Rochester
at the
male
great
choir.
detail work. Yeah, spectacular. All right. In 1901, Dr. Henry Plummer joined Dr. W. W. Mayo, Dr. A. W. Stinchfield, Dr. Christopher Graham, and Dr. Melvin Millett in their group medical practice. Dr. Plummer convinced Dr. Will that they needed a new building. Officially called the Mayo Clinic, the red brick building was completed in 1914 on the site of Dr. W. W. Mayo's first Rochester home. It was the first integrated medical practice and this building came to be known as the 1914 building. When patient registration quadrupled in 1924, plans were made to construct a larger facility, which is our beloved Plummer building. So most of you know where this is. Those of you, or those of you who are not from here, this was a spectacular building. And that pretty well captures kind of the red brick. This entrance had been covered over. I'm not sure what year that got blocked in, but it did. A curious side note to this, the company that was, well, the public was told that this building was falling in on itself, that it was in complete disrepair, that it was a danger, and the demolition company came in with wrecking balls, cranes, everything, and it was such a difficult building to tear down that they were a day away from getting a dynamiting permit to implode this building. So there was nothing wrong with this building, and there's a debate that is a valid one about the footprint and whether or not the future use of this site on balance is more important than the history of this building. That should be a public discussion. It wasn't. And I think today, as we move through kind of reconfiguring ourselves, for lack of a better term, wouldn't that make a lovely and wonderful medical museum? We're looking for places for people that attracts people. This would be it. John, if you have a comment on the 1914 building?
Yes. If we could have sequenced the Chateau Theater before the 14 building, those of you that remember the 14 building,
Oh, here, I got it.
the whole inside was rookwood tile. If you're familiar with rookwood tile, that interior was basically priceless. At the time, I was the president of the History Center and contacted Eugene Mayberry. And I said, Eugene, I'd like to tour this building. I'd like to take photographs. I want to look at it. And in the course of that, well, I had to make a promise. Eugene said, if you want to look over this building, you can spend as much time inside that building under one circumstance. And I said, what's that? He said, you do not make an issue of the Mayo Clinic tearing down the 14 building like you did with the Chateau Theater. If you're willing to make that promise to me, I'll let you look at it. Now, to let you know how far the tentacles are, I contacted the Attorney General, contacted Nina Archibald, Charles Nelson, who was the historic architect for the University of Minnesota, and talked to them regarding the 1914 building, which was our only national landmark in the city of Rochester at that time, a national landmark, okay? It's the highest level of a historic structure that we can have. It was referred to as what, the first joint
Integrated
medical facility in the United States in 1914. Went to, I don't remember the person in charge of the National Trust in Washington, D.C. No one would step forward and express an opinion regarding the demolition of the 14 building. To say that it was unsound and couldn't be utilized was foolish. I knew Dr. Butt quite well. Dr. Butt, Hugh Butt, was the person that got the money for, was it the Siebens building that was there? And basically he said to me, he said, we need to start construction on that building by such and such a date to be able to receive, I can't remember what it was, at $28 million. And I said, Hugh, that's a mistake. You're going to live to regret this. And I think, as Kevin said a little bit earlier, I think if the clinic could roll back the history a bit, they realize that, and that should still be here today. Luckily, a few pieces of the roof, oh, by the way, said to Dr. Mayberry, this tile is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and there are those people in California that would come here and salvage it and reuse it. He said, there will be, you promised me there'll be absolutely no attention given to the interior of this facility, and so this was all demolished, other than a few pieces on the stairwell and the elevator and some of the light fixtures. Okay. This, by the way, also had a purification system that was put in it with the use of limestone that was used to purify the air for the patients that were within this 1914 building. Many things were cutting edge.
This is referred to as the E.A. Knowlton House. He was the owner of Rochester's premier department store from 1897 to 1917. He was also the founder of the Union National Bank. And John wanted this slide. I'd forgotten about this home, but it's by Purcell and Elmsley. They were renowned Minneapolis architects. Purcell. Thank you. Thank you. Was that Jane?
No, that was Christine that spoke out.
There we go. Well, I knew it was one of the smartest ones in our group.
Right.
Yeah.
Smarter than us.
And in 1952, it became the Jewish Synagogue and Community Center, and it was torn down to become a Mayo parking lot. But I mean, look at the fence line and this beautiful tile roof.
Poured concrete, copper flashings, Ludowici tiled roof. It did have I think, an addition put on it.
It did.
But the point is, there was absolutely no public discussion. Again, it was acquired with nonprofit tax dollars and demolished because we have yet to deal with our parking and transit issues.
Yeah. This is John Henry Kaler's home. It was at 527 West College Street. And in the late 1800s and early 1900s, Mr. Kaler was already well along in his establishment of a local empire consisting of hotels and retail businesses. And in 1909, he built the Colonial Hospital. A part of that is still standing, and cemented a lifelong friendship with Dr. William J. Mayo and an alliance with the Mayo Clinic. And in 1923, he commissioned the architectural firm of Ellerby and Beckett to remodel this home that was originally built in 1873. He had a number of, he basically made the front entrance on College Street. It had been like on the other side of the home, and then added all this detail work up here. I believe added this portion of the home up there for a sunroom. And then the interesting thing about this, and I remember this home, there was a horseshoe-shaped driveway that was created to serve as a way to welcome guests. And you can imagine Mr. Kaler and his wife being in the hospitality business. Welcoming guests was an important thing. And later, his daughter Mary, who had married a gentleman by the name of Dr. Philip Hench, who was a award winner of the Nobel Prize in Medicine.
With Kendall.
He, with Dr. Kendall, so Kendall and Hench, he and Mary then resided in this home until Dr. Hench's death in 1965. And then in 1973, Mary Kaler Hench donated the property to the Mayo Foundation, and it is now a parking lot as well.
And that was, some of you that don't remember, that's to date, our only Nobel Peace Prize winner.
Nobel Prize winner, yeah.
Yeah, in the city of Rochester, and we waited for her to pass on, and then demolished that home for a parking lot. Their wishes had been that it would be used for medical students.
Well, and the other thing is, just down College Street is where Dr. and Mrs. Hench lived, and my wife and I discovered when we lived in that neighborhood, and it's still there, we call it the secret garden. Mm-hmm. If you go down to that area between where those houses were, is still parts of the garden that join those two homes together. And it's shaded with trees. You have to kind of climb in there, but it's just it's a most peaceful spot that still exists on 4th Street. So if you get up that way, go check out the secret garden.
Yeah, a nice little terracotta bench.
Yeah, it's lovely. When his brother moved to Mayo, Dr. Will decided to build a larger home up College Hill. We know that as the Foundation House. And then their previous residence was replaced that same year by the College Apartments. This was Rochester's first luxury rentals, and it was designed by the firm of Ellerby and Associates. It was a state-of-the-art structure for the time. The main part of the building facing West College Street was 4 stories high, rising above a raised basement that also contained apartments. And you can see those down in there. 2 wings led to the rear of the property, providing an airspace between them. All apartments had at least one exterior wall with windows for light and ventilation. The exterior was a combination of red brick and timbered stucco, which gave it a Tudor appearance, and a small, unobtrusive main entrance right in here led to a central stair hall. Each apartment had 1 or 2 bedrooms. Some had fireplaces, and all had electricity, central heating, and individual bathrooms. The building was raised, that means demolished, for a parking lot. And in Ken Olson's book, with its demise, I would quote, "A last reminder of old College Street, for which it was named, was forever lost." This was this happened in 2007, and it really was a senseless demolition. It was a very viable, despite Mayo's claim to the contrary. Nobody was able to get in there and verify any claims that were made. And it not only led to kind of a demise of this part of downtown and took away affordable housing, dignified housing, but what happened then up the block on the 5th on 5th project done by Mr. Hamilton was then the domino effect was that of this 52-unit apartment complex was to build 5th on 5th and destroy a historic neighborhood up there with 52 apartment units.
Kevin, I think it'd be important to remember that just prior to the demise of this, was it the city that had funded a discussion for affordable housing?
Yes.
That's what we needed? And the citizens of Rochester were told that this was an obsolete building, even though it was poured concrete and it had a tiled roof. When testimony came forward by the Mayo Clinic, they said that they'd had multiple fires in it. I'd done my research. That's not true. There'd been 1 fire in it. That spokesman for the clinic said that it wasn't sprinkled, which was also false. It was sprinkled, not in each individual room, and it had new electric service and breakers, which they were unaware of. So the points we're going to be making here more than once all along is that the person that wants to demolish a particular structure, it's done in-house without any outside opinions. And the price for that is that we lost this particular facility in an area that it should still be there today. I mean, it injures the surrounding areas as well.
Yeah, you cannot replicate that charm in today's dollars.
Remember the courtyard that it had?
Yeah. And unfortunately, we're not inclined architecturally to design things of this nature anymore, to scale and giving it a neighborhood feel. This is the Lawler's, MC Lawler's, or Lawler's Dry Cleaners. Whoops. This, well, you can see what's the Days Inn there, which is the Carlton Hotel. This is the parking lot where there's a city parking ramp there, so the old Michaels would be right about here. This was the Empress Theater and Empress Pool Hall. The significance of this, and there are these terracotta inlay work that John salvaged that you can see right there. I don't know which one of those. You were probably up on the second floor, knowing a guy like you. You were up there in the danger zone, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. The other interesting thing about this building, and John can tell the story, I didn't know this until about 10 years ago. He salvaged essentially brick by brick the facade of that building, and the old Jaspers or Daubies down on 3rd contains the front, which is constructed with those bricks and those inlays. So when you're down there and you're looking at that building, that's not its original construction materials. These were overlaid over the original facade of that particular building. So John, I'd like you to tell, you told me a story about this in terms of its viability at the time it was torn down.
Well, that was done by Crawford. I think it was 1927. Does anybody here remember who restored that building? Because that building was totally restored, and prior to its demolition, we had a place in there that was called the Operation. I can't remember the party off the top of my head, but it was acquired by the city for that parking lot. And that family that restored the building then left Rochester. They just couldn't take it anymore. Yeah. So as Kevin was saying, luckily, I don't know why, but I was given about 2 weeks to take things from that building before it was demolished. And basically, you go inside Jasper's, or you look at the outside, or you look at this piece, and basically how that was all acquired was working on 20-foot scaffolding and concrete saws and so forth, and cutting that all out, which I couldn't do that today, but that was about 30 years ago. And then luckily, and I want to talk about Patty Menken and Hal, bless their soul. If it hadn't been for knowing Patty, Patty was the one that talked to me about what I had salvaged, and she's the one that acquired the Kennedy building, which is now called the Tap House, and then she also owned the building next door, and I let her have those limestone cutout areas that are in front of, well, I'll still call it Dalby's, and she had the money and the means and the foresight and the vision to see that that helped, I would say, stabilize now what we refer to as historic 3rd Street, yet to be designated as historic. It really is not historic as designated by the city council or consultants.
Right. Okay. So, this was designed by Harold Crawford. It was the Cooperative Oil Company. It was made of all steel. I can't remember, was the top of that green?
It had, I don't remember it. I don't want to say it kind of looks a bit phallic, but I think it was.
Okay.
And it had neon on it, and
yeah,
incredible.
This is a sad loss for me. This is part of the neighborhood I grew up in, but can you imagine that? And then it was torn down for a Burger King. And this is on the corner of 6th Street, which runs up here, and then Broadway. And can you imagine that today as a restaurant or a brew pub or anything? It would be, it just could be masterfully reutilized. But as the old saying goes, demolition is forever.
I want to tell you an interesting tidbit about that building. My former life was plumbing and heating, and I worked in that building quite a bit. And that facility had a women's urinal in it. And I tried to salvage there wasn't time to do it, tried to salvage that landmark piece there as well as the urinal. But that didn't happen. It went down too fast. But I found that very fascinating.
Yeah. Well, there we go. I didn't know that, John.
Well, you do now.
I do,
Yeah.
yes. John and I were talking about this, and we've talked about this for years. If people ask, well, why do you guys get so worked up about these things? Why do you continually fight City Hall? Why do you fight Mayo? Why do you do this? Why do you do that in the name of preservation? I would say that this is collectively our flashpoint. We really did not know each other at the time that the transaction was going on between the federal government and Mayo. But this is the old downtown post office, and it was designed by Rochester native and architect Harold Crawford. It was built in 1934 for $163,500 as part of the federal government's efforts to fight economic depression. The classical two-story building of Winona stone and granite was used until 1969. This is an interior area. You can see kind of in the background there's a guy waiting to get his mail. This is a wood block floor. This is where all the workers worked, and then in the back was the delivery system. I never got back in there, but look at the lighting, look at that open space.
Loading docks in the back.
Yeah.
You remember the loading docks?
Unbelievable. In the lobby area was a 3-panel oil paint mural that depicted the laying out of Broadway by dragging a log behind a team of oxen through the brush, and you can see this here. The mural was funded with a Works Progress Administration competitive grant from the Treasury Department's section of painting and sculpture. Can you imagine that the Treasury Department had something like that? There was a Minneapolis mural artist. He was 28 years old. His name was David Granahan, and he won the competition. And he worked closely with Mr. Crawford on the mural design. And this is really interesting in the research at the History Center. His first concept for the mural focused on medical research and Mayo Clinic achievements. When Granahan and Crawford presented this concept to Dr. Charles H. Mayo for comment, he told the men that it featured too much of Mayo Clinic and suggested a simple historical scene of Rochester pioneers. And today this mural is out in the History Center along with, I don't know if it's that chandelier, but one of those chandeliers. The Mayo Foundation acquired the building in 1974 in a land swap with the federal government. That's just a different angle. There, John, the loading was back in there. So you can see the light fixtures, the stairs. At any rate, it was demolished. This elegant building was demolished 42 years after it celebrated construction. It was demolished in 1976 to make way for a blue glass and steel 110 parking ramp. I want to go back here. There's 6 aluminum historical panels were purchased from the wrecking crew. They're right along here. They each depict different parts of the Postal Service's history. John can tell you about how he acquired those, but at any rate, if you go to the library room at Forager, all of those are in there. And they're, so if you want to take a look at some artifacts, that's where they're at. There were large decorative grills that hung above the 4 main doors were also salvaged, along with some, and I'll get to these, buffalo head carvings from the front columns. 2 of them are at the Olmsted County History Center. I don't think we can see that. Well, in the next one we will.
Yeah,
The clinic retained the American eagle perched atop the building entrance in the cornerstone. We're still trying to locate those. Look at the decorative work there. This is a 42-year-old building. I would surmise that this was probably easily a 500-year-old to a 1,000-year-old building, the way it was constructed. There you can see the buffalo head. Look at the attention to detail. Here's a guy swinging. Look at the brickwork in here, and then overlaid were the columns there. And this is a parking ramp, as I said, but this is an interesting vantage point, and this is a photograph that John obtained from someone a number of years ago. And here we got the wrecking ball, and you can see what we've got in the background.
I think the important point to maybe take away from this is that this was once a public asset. It was an asset spent with WPA money, put people to work. It was an incredible statement, an incredible monument. I'll use the word landmark. You know, how do we define a landmark? Well, I think people that have lived in an area know what a landmark is, even if authorities don't call it a landmark. The Mayo Clinic received a piece of property down in Kansas City, Kansas, that the federal government wanted. So they received it as a nonprofit, and without people within the city of Rochester, because we don't have an inclusive discussion about a lot of assets that we have. That was swapped out, and the clinic acquired it. And those of you that remember how fast this demolition took place, there was no discussion, and boy, the demolition just almost happened overnight without any public discussion. Do you remember the blind person that was inside the post office?
Candy store.
Candy store, yeah. A blind person was in there, and people would pay attention to people trying to steal anything from him, and had newspapers in there. Across the street was one of my family's hotel, the Virginia Hotel, if you remember that. So what was it, 42 years later, we lost the post office. Yeah. So yeah. There's a couple of the light fixtures at Foragers, and the aluminum panels at Foragers for you to enjoy. And if you haven't seen the diorama out at the History Center, go out to the History Center.
Yeah, it's
support the History Center.
Yeah, and there's a wonderful World War I exhibit out there as well, and they're glad to help you with any kind of research. So we're going to move beyond just actual demolition to a concept that John and I call demolition by ephes, which is stuccoing over lovely buildings. This is Morgan Stanley. This is the corner of Broadway and 2nd Street. This is the old Woolworths building. It was gray glazed fired brick, spectacular. If you go down there now, it's this nondescript salmon-colored stucco that matches the lovely Hilton Garden Inns, that architectural masterpiece.
You're giving it too many compliments,
yeah,
Kevin.
Okay. So that's demolition by ephes. This is the building that's going down right now. This is the Tallisrud mortuary and furniture home. And 1879, I believe, is the date up there. The cafe here for years was very successful, the Union Club. You know, very vibrant corner of the city of Rochester. And the owners allowed that to deteriorate, fall in upon itself. There's no reason for that building to be in the condition that it is in currently. So if you neglect property at some point, it has to become demolished. So whether it's intentional or negligent, who knows? But that building that has served this community well for years has been lost. One of the great irritations I had is when the Union Club went and ephesed and stuccoed over that and covered up all the beautiful brick and actually covered up that 1879. John said, well, we should try to get that 1879 landmark, and I said, well, it's plastic, because what they did is after they stuck it over, they put plastic numerals over that.
Those of you that are familiar with the history of this community, in 1883 we had the cyclone. So I think it's very important to remember, okay, that this building here, 1879, survived the cyclone. It was an area where Kevin's going to a little bit later talk about Payne Furniture Store. It was an area where corpses went. Okay, it was also a triage center. But the important thing is this was on the Dubuque Trail. The Dubuque Trail, maybe you want to touch on that because you're going to touch on the building that you restored,
Well,
1858 building. Yeah. But this on the Dubuque Trail, and it survived the cyclone of Rochester.
yeah, here's the building. This is coming down as well. This is the, and I thank Lee for this. He was out there Saturday, home of the Hupmobiles. This is Moss and McAndrew right here. That's the Blue Duck, the old mask. So this is here, poured concrete floor. John and I tried to negotiate the purchase of this, saw it as a wonderful creative arts space for artists in the community. But that was 3 or 4 years ago, and it wasn't maintained. Water got into the basement, compromised the foundation, and so this will be going down as well. And really, there's no reason for that at all.
Lee, didn't they sell case cars in there as well as a Hupmobile? Was that the case car?
No, Case was.
Oh, yeah.
Around your building.
Yeah, that's right.
This was an old-wheel garage in the early 50s.
Sure.
There's a canopy. I have a photograph that I ran in the paper here probably a few months ago that shows the canopy that came over the sidewalk. That was on this building.
Yeah.
Sure.
There was a gas pump at the curb,
Yeah. We're going to talk a little bit about, those were lost opportunities. We'd like to visit with you a little bit about what we believe to be our opportunities that currently present themselves. Here is the bridge that connects Mayo Park with the area where they just built that new apartment complex. The Mayo brothers would probably be in there, the statues right about in there. One of the things that we've always considered is that the river, in order to be activated, needs to be dredged, it needs to be used, it needs to be canoed in, it needs to be kayaked in, it needs to be rowed in, it needs to be skated on.
And swim in it again.
If you
Years
could.
ago, you could swim in Silver Lake.
Yeah, well, and that leads us to Silver Lake, which we believe is a neglected part of this community's infrastructure. This is an asset. We're all worked up about the bright, shiny new object out on 2nd Street where we're, building something in the gravel pits. Our attention should be directed to these beautiful stone arch bridges, this remarkable lake that's in the middle of our community.
Our Lake Harriet.
There it is. And I don't know what it is. Well, one time there were 20,000 geese, and I guess we can debate whether or not there should be 20-some thousand geese in the community in the winter. Nevertheless, we have kind of compromised this entire shoreline, and now nobody can get down into the lake area. You probably wouldn't want to get into the lake area, but this lake should be dredged and should be utilized much in the fashion that this postcard depicts. And so John and I are, we don't know how to accomplish this. There may be people in this room that are interested in kind of undertaking this, but this should be revitalized and utilized to a much greater degree than it is today. So,
Yeah, and in the process, we'll rebuild the neighborhood, maybe
Right.
with TIF money.
yeah, it's just, well, we could do that, but we're going to have to get dredges in there. It's like, it begs the question, why has it taken us so long to dredge Lake Zumbro out in Orinoco? It defies logic, to be honest with you. I don't know. I remember them about 5 or 6 years ago dredging the part of the river down by the government center, and it wasn't a year and a half or 2 years later where it was, you know, you could tiptoe across it and not get your ankles wet.
Further back than that, they actually bring the lake all down and they haul thousands and thousands of truckloads.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were earth movers in there, and there were dump trucks.
I don't remember.
20 years ago.
Was it?
25 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that was done because of the power station was more active then from a cooling source, if I remember correctly.
Well, and my father has told me that I think it's in this area. There used to be a pagoda, a Japanese garden that was part of this whole scene. And Silver Lake is just an area that we should not take for granted, and we should stop ignoring it. Over where the rowing club is down in here, it's just a hot mess in there of brush and mud, and it's unacceptable, to be honest with you.
What's the cost per cubic yard to dredge? And do you need a containment area because?
Part of the problem, it's a toxic waste dump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
You gotta build a containment area.
Right.
To put it in.
Right.
Been involved in that.
And to a degree, we contribute to that by dumping the snow and salt and so forth there for snow removal, if you remember.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a big project, but we haven't put enough money into it to utilize it as an asset.
Yeah.
It should be an asset, not a liability. Yes, Lee? Did you have a comment?
It was dredged by shovels and mules.
Initially,
Built this lake.
yeah, because there was a mill there.
It was a WPA project, and where the power plant stands now, there was a mill pond.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, up in there.
There was a mill next to it, and the mill was in disrepair, and the mill pond was all sludge. So what they dug out to build the lake, and there are pictures of them, you know, men on dredges being pulled by mules, pulling the dirt up in this area, and they dumped it where the power plant is in order to fill that in and build that area up. So that's where the dirt went.
And there was a place that did some tanning work too, and I think Kevin helped keep some of the stone structure that was a little bit downstream where there's a tannery. Is that correct,
Yeah.
Kevin?
Yeah, that's up by the.
So our point is that this can be an asset of beauty just like Lake Harriet is, and we're hoping that something can take. Yes, ma'am.
Where are we with the demolition of fire station? Not demolition, decommissioning of the fire station.
I'm not sure. Want to comment on that at all? It's a work and play right now. I'm not sure how the fire station's going to be utilized yet.
Okay, so Silver Lake is one.
It's not going to be demolished.
Yeah, Silver Lake is one opportunity. Here's the next opportunity. Rochester needs an historic district. This is, right here is the Kelly Building, built in 1858. My family, my wife and I, my parents helped restore this building. In the corner here, the entire city is platted off that corner. This is looking north on Broadway. There's the Queen City Band. If the photographic detail would show that this is a wooden sidewalk. These are dirt roads. Here now we go into the 20s. Again, these buildings still remain. Most of these on this side, a lot of them up into here. Okay. Here we go, another shot of the 20s. These buildings are still intact, right down into here. And then from here all the way down. These have had different facades put on them in the 50s. Here we go, 40s. The reason that these slides are sequential like this is if there's been one thing constant in the community is this early historic district. This is our primordial soup. This is where the community started. It didn't start at the Plummer Building. We need to continue to remind ourselves of that.
Dubuque Trail.
Dubuque Trail, Yeah, this is where they dragged the log with the ox, right down there to create the city. I just threw this photograph in because I love it. It's Crystal Cafe, good food is good health. You can see it. It's right in here. It was there.
Turned into Huey's Liquor Store, remember?
Yeah. So we put this into, I don't know where the Grand Cafe was, but is that
Oh,
where
was that
Michael's is?
Michael's? Early Michael's? Okay.
So
Thanks, Lee.
there's probably 50 examples of charming restaurants like this that now we're just aching for. We're trying to create this when we already had it. And that's a frustrating aspect of heritage preservation. Look at the neon lights in there, the fixtures. There's the jukebox, John. You probably own that.
That's a
salvaged
That's a
that.
1422 Rockola, but that's
I knew he
obvious.
would know the answer to that. Here's another view. Now you can see how the facades on these were kind of supported with a different look, took away the historic character of that. There's Payne Furniture. There's the Rosa Parks or Dayton's building to give you some perspective. There again is just a street scene. You can see that this is taken at a time when the carillons aren't even up in the belfry up there.
Note the variety of parking back then.
Yeah, angle parking. Let's bring that back. Here's Payne Furniture. This is a significant building. Steve Williams, can you help me with what is that called?
Was that Romanesque? French what? French Second Empire from Jane Beisel.
Yeah, and this is, apparently there's only a handful of these that remain in the state of Minnesota, this type of facade.
Do you want to comment on that further? Because is there another example of that in the state of Minnesota?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you need to go down there, and if we were on the walking tour, we'd be pointing this out.
Do you want to comment further, Jane? Can I have the mic? Okay.
There's talk of putting a skyway in there.
Roll it. Okay.
Skyway.
We got to roll it, Mike
Okay.
saying.
Well, we're working. We got till 8:30. All right.
Michael, I thought, don't we have until 10 tonight?
All right.
I think they think this is riveting, some of them.
At any rate, the Payne Furniture building was important in the recovery effort from the cyclone. This is the government center, or the courthouse is right here. This was Red Owl. And right next to it was constructed the Time Theater. These two buildings still exist. I'm of the opinion, I think a lot of people are of the opinion, that the city owns those. They should not be sold for a 26-story luxury apartment complex. Those are to scale. They're historic. They're architecturally interesting, unique, and there should be an ulterior, an alternate, rather, purpose for those in the theater community, arts community,
Oh, and
whatever.
next to the Riverwalk.
Next to the river. We want to activate the river, not block the river. There's the Riverside building, which is still an anchor down there and has been restored by initially by Louise Hill, who's the godmother of preservation in Rochester. There's just a different picture of it. You know, and there again, all this great detail work. And our fear is that there'll be somebody sitting here 20 years from now at a different presentation going, well, we used to have that, and we don't. But there's the Union Bank. You can see the Kennedy building there. This is a lovely building, and it's been restored in a very nice way upstairs, grand rounds. There's the Kennedy building.
I'm going to add something on the Union Bank there, Tessa's building. There's a developer that wants to remove that building and continue completely south. So the point I want to make is if you're concerned about some of these earlier business districts, then you talk to your council people. I don't want to say that all of these projects are going to use TIF financing, but if they use TIF financing, then the public has a say in the matter. There's currently an option on this building, and if a certain developer gets their way, then everything from that to the south will disappear but maybe the ethos of the Payne Furniture Store will stay.
This is the Kennedy Building. That is just a wonderful piece of architecture and history as well. It was a tobacco
And the
factory.
Manskins restored that. It used to have
They
a
did.
third story, but it was
Yeah.
burned down,
Yeah.
the third story.
And then unfortunately, they were allowed to put a barnacle on the side of this, which compromised the building. So here is John's building on the corner. This is where the half barrel is, and then Kruesel's auction is in here, an antique shop. So this is, and John alluded to this earlier, this is non-historic third. It's not been designated. None of these buildings have been deemed historically significant by outside consultants.
And going back to the 19th century, that third street was referred to as Saloon Alley, and it went all the way to the railroad. So
Yeah.
the Kennedy Building, they rolled and made cigars in there, and this was all wooden boardwalks, and that's where you could purchase anything that you wanted on that whole street. It was kind of the red light district as you got further east over by the railroad tracks.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
I was told that.
Okay. This is where Dooley's is, right in here. This is the old Lawler Theater. This is looking down First Avenue. Everything on this side of the street has been destroyed. Nothing on that side of the street other than the bank on the corner exists. This is part of what should be the historic district. The old China Hall, Newt's,
City
all
Hall.
these City Hall, all these buildings up and down here. That should be part of the historic district in our opinion, humble opinion. There's the commercial club.
Got a half hour left.
I know, we're good. There's just a different photograph of that, and Blickel Jewelers. Unfortunately, this has all just been boarded up, so it doesn't have any streetscape anymore in terms of street life.
Lee, didn't the Post Bulletin relocate in that building at one particular point in time for a short shot? Okay, all right.
This is where the Mayo brothers first started. It's really it's constructed in the late 1800s. It says 1911 there. That's when they remodeled it.
Well, it burned down.
No, they remodeled
Didn't it? Was it? It didn't burn down completely, so it was remodeled in
Yeah.
1911?
Yeah, and that's what the
Okay.
there. This is the Oddfellows building.
Be prepared to fight for that.
Yep, that's on the block.
It'll be demolished.
Yeah, gorgeous building. Here's the 101st Avenue building, Art Deco. It was the KROC studios. So the chateau is right in here. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on the Carlton. I think you should pay attention to this. This is the, next to the Kaler Grand Hotel, this is the last of the hotels that were part of the hotel boom in the 20s and 30s, and has always, curiously, has always been a hotel, not been anything else. And the rest of them, the Arthur, the Damon, the Campbell, they've just all gone by the wayside.
Probably
And-
should mention Native Americans would
Yeah,
stay there.
there is a something that folks from the Conservancy came up with. The Carlton routinely accommodated Native Americans in an era of rather widespread racial prejudice in our community, when Jews and people of color who sought treatment at the Mayo Clinic were not readily accepted in local hotels, except for the Avalon, which is listed on the National Register for that particular reason. The other thing in the research is this has been close to the wrecking ball in 1974 and in 1988, and one of the ideas was to maintain this, restore this, and then back in here build a larger hotel complex that's attached to this. That was one of the ideas in the mid-'80s that never came to fruition for one reason or another. That was Mr. Sadler attempted to do that.
We'd like to encourage you to attend the Historic Preservation Commission meeting of which Christine Schultz is the chair of.
Yeah.
You will find out what's about to happen in Rochester and what the future will be in Rochester as it relates to any of these particular landmarks, whether they are or not.
Yeah. Here's the interior of the dining room at the Carlton. Look at how stylish that is, huh? Leather. Yeah, I mean, we long for places like this, and we have them. We have it here. We haven't lost that yet. All right. Opportunity. This was a lost opportunity in the 80s. It's now currently an opportunity, and we would hope that this is brought back to the community for the entire community to utilize as a multi-purpose performing arts center and gathering space, a place of refuge for people. It has been for years. Here's the inside, those of you that have been there. This is a curious photo in that there's no men. This is all, there's little children, but this is all women. I don't know what it is that they were gathering for. I'm fascinated with that.
Kevin?
Yes?
Point out the guy at the very end of the hallway or the aisle there.
Yeah.
He's wearing he's a milkman.
Yeah, there's a milkman up there. That's right.
Well,
And if I look at it, if you look really close on it, you'll notice there's about 4 or 5 men in the group. And
Right.
I'm not sure why.
Say, Jane, was that probably in 1941? Because there's, inside the chateau, there was a milk parlor. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it, sure. Sure.
Right.
Well, my guess is they wanted to have a break from the guys. That'd be,
Well, here, to Jane's point, here is a photograph from the balcony of a cooking class. So,
maybe it was done during the war.
yeah. So, and that's
Huh?
that's a backdrop.
Yeah,
That's-
fishing
look,
opener.
That's a backdrop. It has that three-dimensional quality, but that's a backdrop. So that was a cooking class. Here they are lined up. We think they'll be lined up once we get the chateau restored. Not only people from the community, but people from outside the community. And here's the lovely mezzanine and balcony area that has been compromised. I will say this, and I know we need to keep this moving along, but for John Kruesel, and I mean this, but for his efforts, this building would not be standing today. He came up with the idea of putting the bank over First Avenue so that they wouldn't have to tear this building down. The blue glass and steel Norwest or Wells Fargo Bank, that is part of his genius looking at solutions to saving this building. Why it's taken, yes, give him a nice round of applause. Why it has taken us so long to come to our senses with this building is beyond both of us, but we're moving, I believe, in the right direction. So, yeah, the chateau. So there's an opportunity. Here are some questions that we have. These are great mysteries to us, and they involve preservation. Here are the statues. Here's the old, the public library is right here, right now. You can see the train there because one of the train depots was right there on the other side of that. The train depot is now over where the Porch restaurant is. Washington Lincoln, gifts from the Mayo family to the city of Rochester. 6,000 pounds per marble statue, okay? Here they are. Elegant. Where are they? That's the great mystery. We have no idea. Legend has it that they're in the ball field directly behind the YMCA and that they were disposed of by Park and Rec or the city as infill when that area was filled in. We don't know. Nobody knows where these are. We've called Park Department records. We can't find any answer to this.
No
The
records.
answer man doesn't know. where they
No,
are.
no records of knowing where they are, or the Civil War cannons, where they went, or the Civil War
Yeah.
stack of cannonballs.
Yeah, see the Civil War cannons? Okay, nobody knows where those are.
I got another one for you, in what used to be City Hall. When I was a boy, my oldest brother had a post bulletin paper route, and the post bulletin was right across from the City Hall. We used to go in there, and you walk up those steps when you know going in the front entrance, and on that level, over to the left, was a big cabinet with a bronze statue of a World War I soldier cross-carrying his wounded comrade.
Mhm.
And that cabinet is now out at the History Center in use. Nobody seems to know what ever became of that wonderful statue.
So the point that you're making, the point we're trying to make is these were public assets, and yet we don't know where they went. There was no public discussion of where they went or stewardship. No idea how they disappeared. Oh,
All right.
I doubt if they disappeared overnight. But
Here's another mystery. A few months after W.W. Mayo died in 1911, the W.W. Mayo Memorial Association was formed, and with contributions, they were limited by W.W. Mayo's sons, Will and Charlie,
children's contribution.
$1. They wouldn't take more than $1 per person or per family. $5,000 poured in. That's the equivalent of about $128,000 today. Kids collected pennies at school, nickels at school. The entire community, at that time, which was 7,500 people lived in the community, they raised $5,000 to construct this bronze statue. And the inscription read, W.W. Mayo, pioneer, physician, citizen, a man of hope and forward-looking mind. And he's depicted in this as being in the middle of a speech, and he'd abandoned his notes that are in his hand there. So here, this is the first location, and then this is the second location in 1952 when the Mayo Park was dedicated. The Mayo brothers, in their presently back home in the amphitheater, they were looking 600 feet, I believe, down the promenade to his sons, and they were lined up perfectly, and they're lined up perfectly with the tower in the Plummer Building. So it was done very intentionally. But here is the wreath laying in 1952. So he was moved there. Then, here's a curious thing. This base is down in front of the Veterans Memorial at Soldiers Field. It's angled sideways, and there's an eagle on top of it. But that was the first pedestal for that sculpture. Then, when it was rededicated in 1952, this is a different marble base that is in, well, we can't tell you where it is, but it's in pieces in a public area. So the question is, I didn't mean to get ahead of ourselves, this statue is now in something called Faith Statuary Park, a non-city park, next to the Gonda building, where the brothers are on the steps and Mother Mose is there. The question John and I have is, how did it go from a public asset to a private asset? There's no record of any transaction occurring between the city of Rochester and the Mayo Clinic as to the city relinquishing their ownership in that part of our history. And, you know, we believe he should go back down where his sons are, and we should create a nice little promenade down there, and he should go back where he belongs in what's left of Mayo Park. So maybe somebody knows how that deal went down, but Dr. W.W. left town, and he came back, and he ended up...
Before you move on, you said what's left. You triggered something of Mayo Park.
All right.
Okay, can I take a minute?
A minute, and then we got to wrap it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, in any case, when I said what's left of Mayo Park, there's very little left of Mayo Park because there's always an argument that public land can be utilized for something else. You do not take away more parklands, especially from Mayo Park. There's so little of it left. Now, Sam Allen originally wrote, one of Kevin's mentors, who was attorney at law, he wrote the gift from Charlie and Will Mayo as it relates to the park that was given, Mayo Park was given to the city of Rochester. Now, when the city of Rochester wanted to put an addition on the Mayo Civic Auditorium, Sam and I went to the city of Rochester and said, this is not the wishes of the Mayos that were giving us to the future generations of the city of Rochester. At that time, he was what, 89, 94?
Yeah.
No other city attorneys in Rochester would help his defense that this parkland should not be utilized as an addition to Mayo Park. So Kurt Taylor at the time said, well, there's a better use for that parkland because it's just a place where degenerates hang out, okay, quote unquote. Now, a few months later, luckily I was called up and said, John, you've got to pay attention to something that was just brought to us as a piece of scrap. I don't know if this was 1907. This was put on a boulder at Mayo Park, okay, and then when that addition took place for the Mayo Civic Auditorium and we got rid of some more parkland, this was removed from the boulder and this was sold for scrap. And luckily I was given a call and we still have this today. You can look at this and you can read this, but I'm just trying to make a dramatic point is do not trust the system as to what they hold dear. People come and go. All of you need to be involved, what it is with knowing what you hold dear and what are we stewards of. Because we're temporary caretakers and then other generations show up.
So, we're going to conclude with this.
Does everybody have a postcard? Okay, can have more than one if you want.
Okay, so
What?
I have a question. Is anyone circulating paper to get everyone to sign up with an email and stuff if they're interested?
I was going to do that and then, I don't know, to say, no, we haven't done that. If anybody wants to sign up, because then who's in charge of the sign up? And that's why I'm encouraging people to get involved with the Historic Preservation Commission. But if somebody wants to sign up, I suppose we can. But
yeah, if you want to sign up something and put your name down and put your email address, well, curiously, the fact that you've shown up here tonight makes you all members of the Rochester Conservancy. And in order for a meeting of the Conservancy to occur, it just takes two people.
What, ma'am?
If two people get together, it's a meeting.
For the drawing.
Signed up for the drawing? When's the drawing going to take place?
Well,
okay.
Good.
All right. So, well, maybe we can get your names. But we want to make a point here because we don't know what is a landmark.
Yeah. Well, so how many, here's the big ear of corn.
Has everybody seen that?
Corn
you know where that
waterfowl.
is?
Everybody know where that is? So, how many would consider that a landmark, something of note in the city of Rochester? Okay. It's readily apparent, right? Well, unfortunately, the people that own this property do not want this listed as a potential landmark and to be afforded any protection or public discussion if they wanted to take that down.
So what that means, and Christine, you can jump in if you like, if a person wants to say that their particular object that they have, because it can be an object, it can be a flagpole, it can be a statue, it can be a cannonball, it can be something deemed historic by the Historic Preservation Commission. But if an owner of that object doesn't want it to be a landmark, they can say, I don't want it to be a landmark, and it can be taken off it. And what that means is, if Libby's wanted to demolish this, if it's not designated as a landmark, that means that there's no public discussion when the demolition permit comes forward.
Well,
so nobody knows what's going on. It just gets demolished.
To lend a little clarity to that, ultimately, under the new ordinance, the preservation ordinance that John and I worked on and a number of people did in this community for 35 years, ultimately that decision, whether it's a landmark, and then if it is a landmark, what should happen with it if somebody wants to demolish it, a property owner, is ultimately up to the city council. We've entrusted them to make those important community decisions, and so that's, I think we're at a much better place now than we were through some of these other buildings that you saw that have been demolished. And I would say that every building that we highlighted tonight should be considered or should have been considered a landmark. The difficulty with putting this presentation together was trying to narrow this down. I mean, we literally could have a 3-day seminar on the St. Mary's Auditorium, the post office, all the information that's at the History Center. And a lot of this is just really quite fascinating on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's really disturbing to know what we've lost, because I'll repeat myself, demolition is forever. You can't get it back. So we need to be careful about what decisions we make in the community. And as to John's point, hey, we're just all passing through, right? Ownership is temporary.
Want to add one other thing. The important discussion that's taking place as we speak is, where do we want tall buildings to be and where do we not want tall buildings to be? All of the consultants that we've hired to date have talked about human scale and smaller buildings. It's more inviting than tall buildings.
Yeah.
So that discussion's going on right now. If you want to be part of it, attend the city council meetings, talk to your council people. I think it's very important, because otherwise I would say that we are all yet going to see, if all of us are going to live, let's say, for another 10 years, I'd say we'll see Old City Hall become demolished, Oddfellows become demolished, possibly Massey's. Most of everything on my block, or the block that I'm on, and to the north and to the south, will be gone. Everybody must engage and express yourself one way or the other, what you hold dear. Any questions?
Well, hold on.
We're
almost done.
Okay, good.
We're almost done.
My gosh.
This is something that a number of people in this room have been instrumental in crafting, and I think it really hopefully summarizes kind of this hour and a half that we've been together. While the soul of our community is more than bricks and mortar, these simple yet essential building materials connect us with each other and past generations, defining and enriching our sense of place. We believe, John and I believe, a lot of people in this room collectively believe, that Rochester's best hope for the future lies not in rejecting and burying its remarkable past, but in embracing and building upon it. We firmly believe that. We've been fighting that. John's been doing it for 45 years. I've been doing it for 35 years. Many of you have been in the fight with us. We firmly believe that. And we hope that other people, that we can broaden the base of people that get involved in these and that appear at the City Council. Our dear friend Mark Bilderbach, he gets sick of seeing John and I. There were the same faces. The community needs other faces, old, middle-aged, young, to step up and say these things are important to us if they are important to you. So we hope that this has been enlightening. We intended it to be, right, John? And it was freewheeling, and we did it in an hour and 23 minutes. So we'd open it up for questions. We didn't need to filibuster people. We've been to too many meetings where people get filibustered.
Ricky had her hand up first.
Oh, yes.
No, we don't have a, I didn't tell you to ask that question.
Well, here's the deal. We just got 501c3 status.
Yes, and we're supposed to make
Or
a press release to everybody that we've got a 501c3 status for the Rochester Conservancy, so Ricky will let you know when we'll have a gathering in that regard. Yes, sir.
At the risk of alienating half the audience here, I guess the question I have for you, I understand when there's public money that's been involved in the building, or in the facility. I guess the question I have for you is, when does private property become part of the public domain when there has been no
I would answer it this way. Once it's designated as historically significant. I think that anybody that buys any of the buildings we look at, when they bought them, you buy Old City Hall, you walk in there, you know you've purchased something that's architecturally significant. There is a fine line between property ownership and the public's right to interfere with the property owner's ability to do what they want with their property. I would say this, none of us, there's an entity in the community that does have unfettered power and control over whatever they own. The rest of us don't. And so I think therein lies the public debate, and it's a legitimate discussion. It's private property rights versus the public's interest in maintaining the fabric of their community. The deeper point that needs to be made is, and we didn't make this, there needs to be assistance for private property owners, incentives for them to say, you know, I can do some different things. I can repurpose this building in a way that meets my needs, my family's needs, but I need some help. An example would be, you'll roll back the property taxes. They never increase on a building that's been designated historically significant.
Unless it's sold for another project later in the game.
There's all kinds of models out there to do this. One of the things I've always advanced, and I get no traction on this, we voted for a sales tax extension for destination medical community. That doesn't exist. As far as I know, there is no destination medical community. So the $10 million that went for that, my opinion would be we should create a revolving loan fund of $10 million. It should be the biggest revolving loan fund in the United States. I think the biggest one right now is Savannah, Georgia, and it might be $10 or $12 million. Your point is well taken. We need to do things to incentivize and encourage people to do things with buildings. Sometimes there's nothing that can be done. It's just economically not feasible. And then people like John and I have debated the 1914 building vigorously. I've finally kind of come around to his way of thinking, but I didn't think that. I lamented the loss of that building, but I thought, you know, they have a higher and better purpose for that. Having said that, I am really afraid that developers that are coming into this community who don't care about this community, and we can name them, the Bob Luxes, the guy that wants to do the Carlton, done. They see the Rochester downtown as a footprint. It's not a footprint. It's part of who we are. So how do we direct that conversation? And Mark, our friend Mark, that's a really hard discussion to have. And people that are developers see us and people like us as speed bumps. We want to get this stuff done fast. We want to get it up. And we're saying, you know, we should take a deep breath and say, what is really important? I've been arguing for 30 years we're at a crossroads in this community. And I think we're at one now, but the line keeps moving. We never draw the line in the sand to say, this is what's important to us. But I think now's the time to do it.
But in fair to your point, if you own a facility, yes, you do have the right to demolish it. We see it time and time and time again.
Yeah.
Unless you ask for public assistance. Then it's a different ballgame.
Yeah. But it's a matter that should be discussed in public and debated clinically. Yes.
Something I'd like to comment on, we're talking about incentives, we're talking about local landmarks.
Stand up, would you please, so I can hear you?
One of the other things about landmarks are there are benefits that come with landmark designation that have nothing to do with what the city can incentivize or anything else. The Conley Moss building, which is the first National Register building in Rochester that's received 20% state tax credits and 20% federal tax credits. That's credits. 40% of construction was covered by tax credits. It was also the first building in Rochester reviewed under
Christine, I want to add something to your bullet point. When you go on vacation, or you want to let your hair down, and you want to go someplace that's inviting, charming, whatever, ask yourself, where do you go? Now, we can have some of that here as long as we have the discussion and agree on what is that fabric that makes it charming. Usually it's human scale, but if we give it away freely with the help of TIF dollars, we're promised that we're going to be given tax, that we're going to have revenue that's going to come and replace our charm and make things inviting enough so that the right people come here and live here. So I'm going to suggest that probably a lot of us have gone to Red Wing, probably Lanesboro, maybe overseas. I don't know. I don't think you go to your places to visit New Ephes. Just a guess. Yes, Mark.
Just a couple clarifications. There was $10 used on the county hospital.
Right.
Yes.
Participated. Kevin talked about a revolving account. The city is looking at that.
Yeah.
We won't go into the dollar amount at this point.
Yeah.
It still relates will be addressed in the next couple.
Oh, that's great. Good. Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
what you need to listen to Kevin and John talk about is these things don't happen bang overnight. They've talked about projects and some disappear fairly quickly, but they don't happen overnight. If you don't take the time to get involved and follow what's going on, take a look at what's going on, things will happen that you think happened overnight.
Yeah. No, things do. They don't happen overnight, but we don't tend to pay attention to that. We're all busy doing what we're doing, going from point A to point B, taking care, all kinds of things. I want to follow up one thing, and then we're going to go. This gets to the incentive part of this. I would imagine, and Steve and Jane could maybe chime in, I bet all of the materials, all the workers, the architects, everybody on that Conley Moss building was from town. They were local. We used local products, local workers, local architects, local contractors. That's the great thing about heritage and historic preservation. It's been proven time and time again as part of the Main Street program. It revitalizes the economy. It keeps the money in the community.
And it is green.
It's green. We're filling up landfills with bricks and mortar and stuff, and there's Rookwood tile.
And Rookwood tile. So the new the buildings that are going to be built where an old one is torn down, keep in mind all that debris goes to what's called the sanitary landfill.
Yeah. All right. So thank you guys. Have a great night. All right.
That was Councilman Mark Bilderback in the back, and I want to say something about Mark. Mark walks the talk. He attends the Historic Preservation Commission meetings. He wants to be kept informed.
Yep.
You encourage Mark to push your agenda forward, or at least make that discussion.
Yep.
Thanks for being here tonight, Mark.
Yeah. All right.
Pick a name.
God
What's
bless.
this? Oh,
Pick a name.
Pick a name. Okay. Don't run off. We've got a name here, and is it yours?
No, you didn't pick me. Pat Dean.
Oh, okay.
I'm looking at that like, well, you get a UMR T-shirt. This is Patrick Dean. He's retiring from University of Minnesota and from our nursing program this year. You get a T-shirt.
Can we have these so we can put together?
And come on up and take a look at
take
a look at this stuff too if you want.
I need the email address, then I can definitely drop them off to you.
Okay, thank you.
I will definitely.
Thank you very much. Well, I hope we weren't. Thank you for the opportunity.
If anyone wants a consummate DVD
Okay, sure,
of the
sure.
history of
Thank you.
Rochester,
Yeah.
Mike Pruitt is selling these for $15 a piece. 10? 15? If you have $15, this is a wonderful thing.
Hi, Angie. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
This from Pete.
Relive your memories.
Okay, come here, sweetie.
Yeah. Yeah.
It costs about $10.
Oh, yeah.
Is that
Say,
what it is?
That
Diane.
is non-toxic.
Diane, raise your
Oh, they're like
hand.
Zumba.
Angie gets
I
to
don't know
have
what
as
we got
many
here.
postcards
I don't
as
know
she
what we got
wants.
here.
I would assume it's non-toxic.
Okay?
I mean, that's just further down.
Angie, if you want more, I bought 500. So,
I don't know.
Three categories.
Oh, you want one of those? Did you grab one? All right. Okay, yeah, they're wonderful. They really are. Here, Mike, just made $15.
I didn't mean that to sound overly negative. It's
No,
just
you
a-
didn't. I think
It just seems to me a legitimate question.
Oh, I think it is.
That when you're talking about, and economic viability is, I think, has to be an important part of it.
Oh, absolutely. No, we're not
And
somebody.
as I
yeah.
told your wife, we live in North Carolina in the wintertime.
Okay.
And this winter we visited Williamsburg.
Oh, yeah.
Our son writes for a show that was filming in Williamsburg. So,
Yeah.
and we went to Montpelier, we went to Monticello, we went to
Yeah.
Mount Vernon. Great places.
Yeah.
Wouldn't want to live in any of them.
Right. I know what you mean. No, it's part of the problem is there's never a public debate about it. I mean, you and I should be able to have a spirited debate on either side of that issue and go, well, you know.
I agree with you more if there has been public money involved.
Yeah.
Or my concern is, and it's